Beep, 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 beep. Hello, welcome to the Court of the EDI Jester, and thank you very much for watching. We've got an important one for you here today, which is from schoolsallianceuk.net. This is something I've been sent by one of my warrior teachers. I'm a little bit behind on this one, which is not like me, but I think it's, better late than never, innit? Okay, but it's worthwhile talking about because it comes from safeschoolsallianceuk.net. And Safe Schools Alliance are very heavily involved in the battle against the nonsense and wokery that's being taught in the schools from primary right the way through to colleges, dealing with people who are up to 18. So it's entitled Academic Experiments and Child Safeguarding. We have written, they say, an open letter to Professor Arif Ahmed, Director of Freedom of Speech and Academic Freedom at the Office for Students. So the Office for Students oversees education. He's a great man. I've spoken to him. He's a really good man. It's a recent position for him, I believe. So I'm looking forward to him getting his feet under the table and really starting to deal with some of these people. So Arif Ahmed, Director of Freedom of Speech and Academic Freedom at the Office for Students. Now, the letter's gone off, right? What they've done is they put the letter onto their website. The link for you to to read it is in, as usual, in the Dubris downstairs. Please do subscribe, become a warrior teacher. Dear Professor Ahmed, congratulations on your appointment as Director for Freedom of Speech and Academic Freedom of the Office of Students. We write to you as concerned parents, guardians, teachers and professionals with regards to academic freedom and its interaction with the safeguarding of children. Safe Schools Alliance was established in 2019 in response to the significant increase in safeguarding failures in primary and secondary schools across the UK. Safe Schools Alliance is an apolitical, secular organisation that takes a safeguarding first approach and supports high quality, age-appropriate sex education. The UK government is now beginning to recognise that poor quality and dangerous pedagogical meaning the teaching of children, pedagogy, as opposed to andragogy, which is the teaching of adults, pedagogical practice and materials are in use in some British schools. Recently, the Secretary of State for Education, Gillian Keegan, sent a letter to all schools in England asserting that parents must be permitted to see the material to which their children are exposed for RSE, PSHE, acknowledging that parents have an essential role to play in safeguarding their children. They then asked the question, safeguarding first or academic freedom? That's a very interesting question to ask. We expect you to be already committed to the safeguarding of children and the principles and practices that underpin this. Nonetheless, for clarity, we've included a one-page summary of what constitutes child safeguarding in UK schools in Annex 1. So you can go and read that off their website from the link in the Dubris. In our investigations into the rise of safeguarding failures in British schools, we find that recently established paradigms in higher education have profoundly influenced contemporary policy and practice in relationships, sex, and sexuality education. We are concerned that the academic research currently relied upon lacks robust ethical oversight and impartial peer review processes, which has resulted in the introduction of experimental and harmful approaches, curricula, materials, and pedagogy to UK schools that undermine the most fundamental of child safeguarding principles and practice. This includes, but is not limited to, the exposure of children to concepts, content, and activities that may be considered illegal under the Sex Offence Act 2003, and the promotion of partisan political beliefs, which is prohibited under the Education Act 1996. They are, of course, referencing here in this article, Safe Schools Alliance, are referencing here the abject failure of schools to gatekeep these ridiculous LGBTQ organisations that are promoting some of the worst PSHE and RSHE they possibly could, which is focused on gender identity, ideology and transgenderism, as opposed to being, Uncle Bob loves Uncle Bill and Aunt Fanny loves Aunt Victoria, and this is men and women and when two people love each other. That's what they're talking about. Queer theory, gender identity, ideology, the postmodernist approach, deconstructing, the idea of sex. Very dangerous ideas being taught in schools, and they are wholly political. So I'm with them all the way. in that something needs to be done here. And I'm also very aware of Hannah Lufty, who was a lawyer for an organisation, said recently that it's probably non-contact child abuse. And I think that may be the route to go down, is to arrest a few of these people, and it will stop the nonsense in its tracks. Safe Schools Alliance then continues, there are complex issues to unpack and an urgent need to improve the safeguarding of children, with which we would be grateful for your support, including backing a full independent inquiry into the sexualisation of children in higher education. Right? So I've got to read this right, okay? So what they're saying is they want a full independent inquiry into the sexualisation of children in higher education. They're not saying that people in higher education are children. What they're saying is that the things going on in higher education are being taught to people who want to become teachers, who are then taking the mantras of the cult and the mantras of these lunatics into the schools and indoctrinating children. It's Maoism. Right? That's what they're saying. I think, for God's sake, Safe Schools, if I'm wrong, put me right. Right? But I think that's what's happening. We outline our concerns on what is happening below with examples from across the UK and ask you to answer two questions. To what extent should freedom of speech and academic freedom permit the sexualisation of children? It's a very good question, isn't it? What will the Office of Students do about the recently established paradigm in higher education that is currently embedded in multiple academic fields, which promotes and encourages research and pedagogies in the UK schools that should be recognised as illegal under the Sex Offences Act 2003 and Education Act 1996? Very interesting point there. Absolutely key to understanding what is happening here, where they say about the recent established paradigm in multiple academic fields. Remember, postmodernism, post-structure, all that stuff that from a layman's point of view is garbage that's being taught to their children about trans people and queer people. This garbage that's being taught is a template that is laid over each part of the curriculum. It is not one single thing. So it'll be maths. Johnny's got a trans friend who's got 4 figs, and the trans friend's got somebody else who's a queer non-binary dog barking entity. If you give the queer non-binary dog barking entity a fig, how many figs has the trans lad got left? That's what it'll be. In geography it'll be, well, the migration of queer and trans people, right? Or you get it, right? Or or in English literature it'll be, now we're now going to do 1984, we'd like you to do this through a trans and queer lens. That's what you've got to understand. It is an enveloping parasitic cult movement that will lay across the school. And any school that is involved with the likes of No Outsiders and all the other gender loons we know about will fall for this. Will fall for this. There's a Twitter thing, I keep telling you this, called Head Teacher Chat, @HeadTeacherChat. Go and get this, or me, and Adam. Let's see if the head teachers want to know about this. Then they ask again, do we need to look at this under the Sex Offences Act 2003 and the Education Act 1996 in order to move forward? And I think that's a very interesting question. So, culture of child sexualisation in higher education. In recent decades, they continue here now, there appears to have been a rise in the number of academics conducting research into so-called childhood sexuality in the UK. The research is predicated upon the hypothesis that children are sexual beings from birth and argues they have unmet sexual needs. Looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. The aim of this appears to be to manufacture evidence that supports such a hypothesis, along with the production of teaching materials and pedagogical approaches that sexualise children. There is a massive difference, folks, between ensuring that children understand about sex and sexualising them. Okay? We identify the exposure of children to sexual content, whether in the guise of research, peer-reviewed teaching material and pedagogic approaches, or otherwise, to be a form of non-contact child sex abuse. We identify that the commercialisation of teaching materials that sexualise children to be a form of child sexual exploitation. We identify the uncritical promotion of harmful niche ideologies in higher education under the guise of diversity, equity and inclusion. There it is. The die, the monster, the EDI needs the stake, doesn't it? The Van Helsing to stake the parasitical vampire. any of this, they say, anything or otherwise, anything that is manifested, social emotional learning, it's all of that as well, it is a failure of higher education's purpose to enable students to succeed, ensure confidence in high quality course, advance intellectual development and shape a civilised society, and will bring higher education in the UK into disrepute. There's so much in this you need to go and read. I've done my bit. You go and do your bit and read it and have a look and see what is happening. Particularly the information available in the annex about specific examples, and then perhaps visit safeschoolsallianceuk.net website and do a bit of exploration of your own. Get curious. I say this, somebody said to me the other day, I was having a conversation with Nick Buckley around Manchester stories and, my love of Manchester. And he said, what would you recommend that parents need to do? And I said, you get curious. Get very curious. Curiosity is power, folks. It's the new dynamic. So get curious. Please do go and have a read of the safeschoolsallianceuk.net and perhaps offer your support by sharing this and that on Twitter and other social medias. Other than that, I'm going to leave you to it. Have a grand day. Ta-ra.